Hello, everybody. First off, this afternoon or this evening, I just wanted to give you all a quick update or give an update to the announcement from yesterday. I know the governor is reopening the state, and churches are going to be allowed to open as well, which is great news for us. The issue for us right now, however, is the way in which we can reopen our building and the regulations that have to be followed, or the guidelines, the recommendations that come from the governor. There are, in other words, opening back up currently where we are with everything is a little more difficult than it sounds. There's a lot that has to be taken into account. So one of the main concerns I have, for example, from a logistical standpoint, is the fact that people 65 and over are encouraged not to come during this phase. That's about 80% of our congregation. Those are the kinds of things I just wonder about morale, just things like that. Everybody else is meeting, and that age group can't. But then you have, child care, nursery, that can't happen right now. Sunday school couldn't happen. Any type of enclosed groups, things like that. Will parents want to come if there's no child care? We have pregnant mothers. We have people in our congregation that are more vulnerable than others to infection or if they were to get the virus. And so those are just things we do need to continue to take into account. There's a lot to consider. What I want you to know, though, especially with news coming out, is that myself and others are monitoring the information as we get it very closely, very carefully. I'm aware of these things. We're aware of these things. And we will keep you updated as we go along. As we know things about when we're opening, which I believe will be sooner rather than later. I intend for it to be sooner rather than later. I hope it's sooner rather than later. I feel good about that. But, we don't really want to stay closed. I don't think anybody does. But we also don't want to take unnecessary risks. Now, there are risks inherent in everything you do, even when you can take certain steps in a situation like this. There are still risks that you have to take, that you're willing to take, you probably need to take, and then there are risks that you don't need to take. And so we're just kind of in that gray area. I've never faced anything like this as a pastor. I don't. So I would deeply appreciate your prayers here. I would very much appreciate your prayers, just because I just for wisdom and discernment and clarity. Every time I think we'll go with this date, we'll do this, and then another question comes up. And for example, just to give you some more detail, I was talking to one of the deacons earlier, and one of the guidelines or recommendations from the governor is that, which I think we need to respect at this time, was that people that do come need to wear a mask and possibly gloves also. Now, that's fine. I mean, but the question is, what if someone arrives without a mask? I don't think you can order bulk masks. How do you turn people away? Do you let them in? So these are the kinds of things where it's like, oh, okay, what do we do about that? And things like that just keep popping up. So I don't want you to think I don't want to make a decision, or we're never going to make a decision as just, we're not going to meet again until there's a vaccine or something. It's nothing like that. Again, when I said until further notice yesterday, I simply meant we're not going to put a date on it. I don't mean it's going to be a while. I want you to know that. I'm saying I'm looking at mid-May, late May. Where do we go with it? Do we pull the trigger now? Do we wait until we're in the next phase? It's just what I want you to know is I'm hearing the information that comes out from the governor, from the president as well. I'm keeping track of that. I'm trying to consider all the different questions, but we will absolutely keep you informed. And when we're ready to meet again and we're ready to pull the trigger, you will know, and there'll be plenty of notice. And just please be in prayer. This is just unique. And look, I don't mean that I'm not suffering or something. And there are people that are losing jobs, those are the real issues. Please don't hear me say, what I'm saying is, I need wisdom for a situation that I've never encountered before. None of us have, so meaning, when I talk to the deacons or the trustees, this is just totally different for us. So thank you so much for your prayers. I want you to know the online sermons and devotionals will continue as long as we're not meeting. And we even, when Chuck and I recorded the sermon this morning, there was a lot of conversation about what we need to purchase, and so that once we start meeting again, we're able to continue recording and posting the videos that are good quality. And so that will continue whether we're meeting or not. I just want you to be aware of that. So just please know that we will keep you informed. I will keep you informed. And please be in prayer. I would deeply appreciate it so much. Moving on from that, let me share with you briefly here something from Psalm 77. This is a wonderful text. The header for the psalm says, "In the day of trouble I seek the Lord." And so it's like all the psalms, it's so relevant. But this is another psalm of Asaph, another song. The psalmist is so troubled by what seems like the Lord's absence or even a lack of concern from the Lord. It's so bad that he writes in verse 4 of Psalm 77, "You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak." He literally can't get it out. And so he asks then in verse 7 and verse 9, will the Lord spurn forever? That's what he feels like is happening. God is spurning them or him. Has God forgotten to be gracious, he asks. What a horrible thing to feel. But there are moments we will feel like that. Has God literally forgotten to be gracious to me? Is it that bad? But as so often happens in the Psalms, it's as if the writer remembers in the midst of this grieving or complaining or anxiety, wait a minute, I know who the Lord is. I know better than that. And so we read in verse 10, "Then I said," after in verses 1 through 9, his complaint, his grief, his sorrow, his confusion, "Then I said to himself, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High." God has a record. He's not left himself without a testimony when we have questions for which we feel like there aren't any answers. God has not been silent there. The psalmist says, I'll look back on the things God has done to find an answer for my complaints, to find out, for example, if it's possible that God would spurn us forever. If it's possible that God would simply forget to be gracious. Has he ever done that? Do we ever see him doing that? I'll appeal to this, to the right hand of the Lord Most High. And he comes up with this. Listen to verses 11 through 20 and hear how once he does that, the tone of the psalm completely changes. Look at verse 11. "I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. I will ponder all your work and meditate on your mighty deeds. Your way, O God, is holy. What God is great like our God? You are the God who works wonders. You have made known your might among the peoples. You with your arm redeemed your people, the children of Jacob and Joseph. When the waters saw you, O God, when the waters saw you, they were afraid. Indeed, the deep trembled." There's something that can make the ocean depths tremble. "The clouds poured out water, the skies gave forth thunder, your arrows flashed on every side. The crash of your thunder was in the whirlwind, your lightnings lighted up the world, the earth trembled and shook. Your way was through the sea, your path through the great waters, yet your footprints were unseen. You led your people like a flock by the hand of Moses and Aaron." And I wonder if when Jesus was in the garden, specifically, struggling so much, if his mind went to the record of God's redemption through the years. If in his mind, as he was praying, as he was in his grief and torment, if he was able to recount or remember the consistency of God's plan over the thousands of years, from before creation onward, if the record of God, if how God had acted, if what God had done began to recur to him, if we were to put these prayers on the lips of Jesus, how so often when it seemed as though God was absent and that God had turned his back or that God had forgotten to do things he said he was going to do, if actually what was going on is it was just that the water was so high, coming up to my neck, that I just couldn't see his footprints. I wonder if Jesus, fully God, fully man, in the Garden of Gethsemane, sweating drops of blood, I wonder if what finally got him to his feet, as the angels comforted him, was pondering his Father's work. The years of the right hand, that's a symbol of God's acting, his actions, his power, his authority, the years of the right hand of the Most High. For a while, the great shepherd was a sheep also, bleeding for comfort, as so many of us often do. But God had a record. God had a record. And Jesus endured and went to the cross, to his death, not because it became easy to endure the pain and the suffering. It most certainly didn't. But because he knew his Father's record. Our salvation was paid for fully in the blood and righteousness of Jesus, then, in some way, because God doesn't change. Because God has a record that can be relied upon and trusted in the darkest night conceivable, which is what the Garden of Gethsemane was. When I read this psalm, what really gets to me is that line in verse 10. Let me read it again. Then I said, I will appeal to this, to the years of the right hand of the Most High. To what does the child of God appeal in this world? When he is suffering, when he can't understand, when things don't make sense to her, to what does the child of God appeal? Do we appeal to our feelings? Do we appeal to what? Please make a note of this in your heart. We do not appeal for comfort, for answers, to new knowledge. Right? We don't appeal to luck or chance or signs or riddles, or even necessarily miracles for our strength or our hope and our faith. We don't need those things to have comfort and security in the midst of confusion or sorrow or pain or trouble. We don't need to find something else. Because we don't need to rely on signs. We don't. That's not where we get our comfort, that in the moment God will give some new thing or some unique thing, and then from that we were okay and everything was fine. Why would we do that? Why would we trade the consistent record we have of who God is and what God has done for something we could work up or cook up in the moment to feel security from? Like we create these emblems or symbols to latch onto when we have the years of the right hand of the Most High recounted for us perfectly as evidence of who God is and where he is in trouble and how he answers our questions. And instead we trade that for things that we learn as we go. We don't need to live like that. And we don't need to create symbols and emblems of things in the world when we have the right hand of the Most High, right? The years of the right hand of the Most High telling us who God is and what God has done. We remember God's record. We remember what he has already done rather than wait on something else, right? Because if we live our Christian lives thinking that God is with us because when we were down, we saw this sign, or, I was driving in my car, or I was getting ready for work, or I was out fishing or hunting, or I was doing this and God showed me this thing, that's fine. And I'm not here to tell you whether or not that was God or not. I don't know. What I do know is that those things are unnecessary, and that's not how we live. That's not how we feel comfort. That's not God's way. God's way is saying, remember my record. In other words, when you bump up against trouble and trial and questions and confusion and darkness, the answer is not hidden somewhere and you have to find it. Right? We don't live lives of mystery like this, of not knowing, of wondering, of depending on or relying on or appealing to something else that comes up, some mysterious thing that superstitious people that think nothing of God also live their lives by. We aren't that. We aren't dependent on those things. We have the years of the right hand of the Most High given to us for us to know and rest in. God's record in the past is enough to sustain and give life to his people in this moment, right now, as well as make our souls secure for the future. We are a people planted and established in what God has already done. We're not a people who always need more, always need new, always need another novelty, always need something unique. We don't need more. We have everything in what has been given and told to us. Don't forget that. Don't forget that. When you wonder if God could be merciful and gracious to you and keep forgiving you in light of the fact that you still struggle with sin, you don't wait to feel like he will on the inside. You don't look for some sign of God to tell you, I got you. No. You look back to the cross. You look back to the cross. When you wonder if your soul will be secure if you were to get sick or if you were to die, or if someone that you love was going to die, you don't look for trinkets. You don't look for new revelations. You look to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Because he lives, you will live. Do you see the reasoning in that statement? My certainty that I will live depends on nothing in the world today. It depends on the resurrection. That's where my hope, that's where my confidence comes from. It's not as cool as for some reason to our minds, as some sign out in the forest. But God doesn't generally work that way, right? If you can't be certain it was from God, why would you ever put all your eggs in the basket of, I had this experience? It doesn't matter. If I take a fork and stick it in a light socket, I'll have an experience. It doesn't mean it was from God, right? So the point is, remember what's already been said and what has already been done. That's faith. That's what it means to live by faith. When you wonder, when you have questions, when you wonder if God is with you when you're suffering, he certainly can give signs, but why wait on something you can't know for sure? We don't have to have things like that or a feeling to know the answer to our questions. Do we understand that? The questions have been answered. They've just been answered God's way. God would appeal to your God would speak to you in your specific sorrow with what he's already done. That's a blanket, beautiful answer for everything. Look at who I am. Look at what I've done. Right? That's his answer. We have the deeds and wonders of the Lord from of old, beloved. We have a huge record. You can access those files whenever you want. Look to his word. Look to his word. Ponder the work he's already done. What God did at Calvary for you and me is way more amazing than if he makes, a fire go out in the woods or something, or, these weird things we come up with. And I don't want to belittle your experiences. I want you to have hope and peace. And I'm telling you, that is found in the record of God. Right? Meditate on the deeds he's already performed. That's where the psalmist found his comfort and his rock. Right? Not in knowing that if he was just waited long enough or put himself in the right position, something would happen and he would know. He knew by what he had read and what he had heard. The deeds God had already done. Beloved, who is great like him? You want great, you want amazing, you look to him. Our God is the God who works wonders. That's what the psalm says, wonders. What wonder out there in nature or in life is as wondrous as what he's done? Think about that. What frightens you and I is afraid of God, right? That's what the psalmist is talking about. His way is through the sea, through it that overwhelms you and me, right? His way is through the great waters that rush over our heads, right? It's just that he's so big we can't see his footprints from where we are, right? Again, when the water's deep, you can't see the bottom. But God is so big, he's standing in it. Like what rushes over our heads and blows us over is what? Smashing up against his shins, right? That's how big he is. in the waters and oceans that overwhelm you and I. God is so big in those things. Make no mistake, though, He's with you. He's with us, beloved, right now. He's with us. He won't leave or forsake us. I don't know that because of something God told me or did today or 10 years ago or will do if I'm patient and careful enough. I know that because of what God has been doing for the thousands and thousands of years that He was working and speaking before I was even a thought. Right? That's how I know that God is with me. Right? Consider, recount, appeal to the years of the right hand of the Most High and rest in Him. Rest in Him.